If you think moving abroad can solve all your issues, maybe you should think about it again. Maria Sanchez, a mother of 3 and small business owner, moved to Dubai a year ago to work as a maid. She wanted to give her family a better life, but during her time there, she learned that being a maid is not always about cleaning the house and making food. Sometimes it can be about sleeping with dogs. I told him the dogs have started bothering me. One came and started licking my body and legs, and it scared me, she said. The man laughed a little and then replied, "These dogs also have feelings like humans and have desires too, so it was asking you to sleep with her and have sexual intercourse. If you believe you have seen the darkest sides of the world, think again." One day they called us, sat us down as a family, and said that no one should talk to the maid nicely. Everyone in the house was instructed to speak to me harshly, with pressure, and treat me with contempt. They wanted to break me. They brought me in and beat me brutally, slapping me. I didn't know if the law allowed them to disrespect and degrade a person like that, but it was happening to me. I was in pain, surrounded by strangers where no one liked me. This man beat me, called bandits to try to kill me, and then they attacked me. In this video we will hear Maria's story. How she moved to Dubai for work, only to have her boss think her job was to sleep with dogs. Shocking, right? But that wasn't the only ordeal she faced. What exactly happened to Maria? Why was she moved from one job to another? How did she save herself from the inhumane act her boss demanded? This is going to be an emotional journey. Whatever you learn from this story is actually happening to people outside. It's painful, but let's brace ourselves to listen to Maria's story. When I was sent to a household for work, everything was new. Honestly, I only enjoyed the job for about 2 or 3 weeks. The problem started when I realized that the woman I worked for was living in the house with her husband and many older sons. There were many temptations. Sometimes I would walk in and find them lying down, and the husband would start touching me. I was shocked by his actions, but I couldn't do anything about it. Their law stated that if you were caught with someone else's husband, they might kill you or send you back home in disgrace. I stubbornly ignored him and sometimes denied his advances, but I could never guess what he was going to do next. It was like I was being tested on every possible ground. If you refuse to do what the boss wants, you should prepare for what is to come. Since you faced such challenges soon after starting the work, how did you manage to stay intact in such a place? The men in that house were trying everything to frustrate me to the core. I used to wake up in the morning and greet my boss, and he would remain silent as if I was not even there. If I did something good, he would either not acknowledge it or address it with disgust so that the good I did could lose its essence. He tried to frustrate me, but I was clear about what I wanted and understood how to behave so as not to be fired. Living in such horror all the time and facing such hatred on a regular basis can be mentally exhausting, especially when you have no one to call yours around. Did this man ever stop? The man kept pestering me, and I kept refusing him. This continued for a long time. The continuous harassment was bothering me, but fortunately one day he finally left me alone. He used to come to my room and touch me, which was very disturbing, but when he didn't show up for a few days, I thought the tough times were over. Some days after the father gave up on me, his 32-year-old son started making advances toward me. When someone in Dubai hires a maid from overseas, they seize their passport, and most of the households do not allow the maids to even step out of the house. In such conditions where you are almost trapped around predators, it was the father before and now his son. How did you manage to stay safe? This son and I talked a lot, and he would ask me about home. Our friendship grew. Oh, so things got easier after that. One day after praying when I got to bed, I felt someone put their arm around me, and I was very shocked. Who was there? I looked and saw it was the boss's son, the only man who was nice to me in that house. I woke him up and asked him, "What's wrong with you? Why are you here in my room at this hour?" I told him to leave. I even told him that if he wouldn't leave, I would have to scream for help. He told me he made a mistake and asked for forgiveness, saying it wouldn't happen again. I tried to make him understand his mistake. I was guiding him as I would have guided my younger brother. We agreed that it wouldn't happen again. But people didn't value their word out there. So the friend I made there turned into a predator. Do you think all of this ended with sexual assault and predation? No, something even more inhuman happened. After the family came to know that I and their son built a relationship over time, we started to develop a bond. We began living together as people who loved each other and wanted to be together. The family eventually discovered I was in a relationship with their son. One day they called us, sat us down as a family, and said that no one should talk to the maid nicely. They told everyone in the house to speak to me harshly, with pressure, and treat me with contempt. They wanted to break me. They brought me in and beat me brutally, slapping me. I don't know if the law allowed them to disrespect and degrade a person like that, but these men beat me, called bandits to try to kill me, and then they attacked me. The violence reached a point where I had to find a way to defend myself, or they would have killed me. I was afraid and angry at the same time. I wanted justice for myself. I was deeply saddened. What a tragedy. Being attacked like that, without even knowing why these people hated me to this extent, could break anyone. I could see that these people could even kill me. I had left my family in the Philippines, and I didn't want to bring misfortune upon them by dying in a foreign country. When I told the son to leave my room the following night, he slapped me unexpectedly, and I was shocked. I couldn't cry. I screamed loudly and then bowed my head and cried, praying to my God, the only one I had left. Doing this takes courage, especially in a surrounding where you know even if you do everything by the book, they can harm you. With each passing day, the family's hatred against me reached a point where I asked to be transferred to another job, thinking that maybe my problems would lessen by doing so. Sounds like a gutsy thing to do, but it was a gamble. 'Cause you never know what awaits you. But I guess this was the only way to escape certain death. The people I had left behind were relatives of the new place's owners. The household I worked for and its people had arrived at my new workplace before me and had already prepared my downfall before I got there. They bad-mouthed me to the extent that no one in my new workplace wanted to see me around. I went there not knowing where I was going, only wanting to leave the previous house. I did the cleaning and my usual work, and the next day the boss called me and said, "Maria, come here. I need to talk to you." I went and sat down and she told me, "We need to move you from here because of what we heard you did at your previous job." No. This would have broken my heart. My previous owners, who wanted to kill me, had now ruined my chances of having a better and calmer time in Dubai. I was disheartened, but I couldn't do anything about the situation. I just asked them to please shift me to a better place. I was not ready to experience anything again that I had experienced in my previous workplace. She reassured me and told me that she would definitely help me. She told me to do my cleaning work well, wash my clothes, and prepare to leave the next morning. Seems like a nice lady. But the good thing is, I was not transferred back to my previous owner's house. When I arrived at the new house, I found it was a very nice place. My bedroom was also very nice, and I moved in without any problem. When I got there, they gave me a week to rest before starting work because there was another male worker who was leaving and another female worker. So I became the third worker. I spent the whole week eating and doing nothing, not knowing what my job would be. Then I heard that the female worker had been transferred to another job, and the male worker was leaving the next day. After facing extreme situations in my last place of work, I would have felt relaxed after a good break. Finally, someone was treating me like a human. But were these people really treating me like a human? The man who was the boss called me into his room. And I went since my lady boss wasn't there. When I arrived, he asked me, "Do you know the job you came here to do?" Said no. He asked again in shock, "You don't know your job?" I replied that the job I usually do is household work, cleaning, washing clothes, cooking and other similar tasks. "Isn't it clear that a maid is supposed to do cleaning?" Yes. His reaction made me doubt if my role was just about housework or if he was expecting something more. He started showing me around his breeding business. Fish, ducks, pigeons, and finally he took me to the doghouse. It was designed like a house for humans. We entered and I saw 4 dogs. Then he told me, "So, I brought you here to sleep with these dogs." At first, my mind didn't immediately grasp what he meant by that. For a second I thought it was some kind of joke. I asked him, "Sleep with them? In what way?" He replied, "You will feed them, clean them, and take care of them." Without much thought, I quickly agreed because I thought the job was very easy. Taking care of dogs, that's what I assumed he meant. Sleep with dogs. Isn't it a spooky phrase to hear? The first week I found the job very easy. The dogs were not troublesome, they were very clean, and they behaved almost like humans. However, I didn't sleep in the doghouse as he had intended, but rather on the porch of the doghouse. I would wake up, clean them, and then go to the main house because the animals were kept in a small house separate from the family. Seems like an easy and comfortable job, right? At least that's what I thought. But after a few days, something strange happened. The dogs started seeking to sleep with me or engage in sexual activities. Dogs. Showing sexual desires. For a human. While caring for them, I noticed one of them acting strange around me. It was rubbing itself against me, licking me in places that made me feel uncomfortable. Terrified, I approached the man and said, "Sir, I have a serious problem I want to talk to you about." He asked, "What is the problem?" I told him, "The dogs have started bothering me. One came and started licking my body and legs, and it scared me." The man laughed a little and then replied, "These dogs also have feelings like humans and have desires too, so it was asking you to sleep with it and have sexual intercourse." Froze. Did I just hear what I thought I heard? I was shocked and asked, "Can a person have sex with a dog?" I didn't even know such an act was possible. He reminded me, "Do you remember when I told you your job was to sleep with the dogs?" I said, "Yes." Then he clarified, "I wasn't just talking about sleeping with them, I meant having sex with them." I couldn't breathe. My mind refused to process his words. He said all this with a straight face, as if it was the most natural thing in the world. I asked, "How can a person sleep with a dog? Besides, I saw they are all male dogs. Does that mean I will have sex with all 4 of them?" He replied, "Yes. You will start with the one that touched you, and then the others will follow." God. This man didn't even ask for my consent. He spoke as if this was something completely normal, something I was just supposed to do. No one had told me this was what I was signing up for. No one could have imagined the fear I was experiencing in that moment. I was speechless. I lowered my head, wondering where I could report him. I thought about going to the neighbors to ask for help. I sat for about an hour, thinking about the answer to give him. What should I do? If I refused, he might harm me. If I accepted, I would lose my dignity, my soul. I needed time. So I made a decision. I asked him, "When should I do these things with the dogs?" He said, "Anytime." "Okay," I said. "Please give me 2 days to think about it. This is new for me. I want to get comfortable with the situation first." He agreed. A very smart way to buy some time. The days I had asked for passed. I approached him and said, "I can't decide to sleep with the dogs. Can't do it. I'm not feeling well. I'm on my period. Give me another 2 weeks to recover." He told me, "No problem. Go and get well fast." I was indeed on my period, but asking for 2 weeks wasn't because it would take that long. I just needed time to figure out how to escape. A smart way to avoid the situation. But what next? During this time, I familiarized myself with the neighborhood. One day, my boss called me and said, "I am leaving, but don't open the door for anyone except us when we return." I agreed. That day, after he left, I packed my belongings. I was about to leave, not knowing he had left people to guard me. As I reached the door, 2 guards caught me. They took me back inside and locked me in a room with a terrible smell and no ventilation. Breathing became difficult in that room. When a maid is caught escaping in Dubai, the owners can do really inhuman things to them. Sometimes they even kill them. The man returned at 8 in the evening. He came and found me locked inside. When he opened the door, he beat me brutally. He caused wounds and made me bleed. After beating me badly, he told me, "This is your first and last warning. Don't try to repeat this mistake." I begged for forgiveness to save my life. He forgave me and let me out. He had some humanity left in him. He didn't take me to the dog room that night, but let me return to the room I had been sleeping in since I arrived. I stayed there for a week. Having your freedom taken away is the worst kind of humiliation a human can face. But in my heart I had already decided I would not stay there. I promised him I wouldn't try to escape again and would do everything he asked. 'Cause that was the smart thing to do. I had to regain his trust before making my next move. When I healed, I told him, "I am ready to work with the dogs as you asked." But I wasn't. I just needed him to believe I was. One night, I spoke with his wife around 5 in the evening. After that, I packed all my belongings. There were cameras monitoring my movements inside and outside the house. But luckily, I managed to sneak my luggage out without him noticing. The next morning I told him, "Sir, we are out of cooking supplies." He asked if I knew where to buy them. I said, "Yes, I know." He gave me money and let me go. I walked to where I had hidden my bags. Then I ran straight to the authorities. When I reached the authorities, I was out of breath, shaking and terrified. I didn't know if they would believe me or if my boss had already bribed people to cover up his crimes. But I had no other choice. I walked up to the officer at the counter and said, "I need help." He looked at me suspiciously. "What's the problem?" I took a deep breath and told him everything. About my boss, about the dogs, about how I was locked up and beaten when I tried to escape. At first, he stared at me like he wasn't sure what to say. Then he asked, "Do you have proof?" My heart sank. How could I prove something like this? My boss had taken my phone away when I first arrived. There were no witnesses who would speak for me. Thought quickly. "The house," I said. "You can go there. There are dogs, and I can show you exactly where I was kept." The officer made a call and spoke in Arabic. I didn't understand what he was saying, but I was afraid he was calling my boss. Would they send me back? Would they arrest me instead? A few minutes later, another officer came and took me into a small room. "Tell me everything again," he said. So I did. This time I didn't hold anything back. I told him about the first house, about how I was beaten, about how I was passed from one abusive employer to another. I told him how my boss wanted me to sleep with the dogs and how I had to beg for time just to figure out how to escape. When I finished, he was quiet for a long time. Then, he stood up and left the room without a word. Waited. And waited. After what felt like forever, he returned and said, "We are taking you somewhere safe." Relief washed over me. They believed me. I was taken to a shelter for abused workers. There were other women there, some from my country, others from different parts of the world. They all had stories like mine. Some had been locked up for months. Some had been raped by their employers. Some had tried to escape but were caught and sent back. I realized then that my story wasn't unique. This was happening to so many women. The authorities helped me buy a ticket to return home. They gave me my passport, which my boss had been keeping from me, and 2 million pesos to help me restart my life. I couldn't believe it. I was finally going home. When I landed in the Philippines, my family was waiting for me at the airport. They didn't know what I had been through. They only knew I had been gone for too long. When they saw me, they cried. Cried too. I was finally safe. My journey in Dubai had begun with a woman who helped people get jobs and visas. She had advised me on the documents I needed, helped me with medical tests, and promised me a good salary. But she had never told me the reality of what I was walking into. She never warned me that I was stepping into a nightmare. Now I tell my story so that no other woman has to go through what I did. Moving abroad for work is not always the dream people think it is. For some of us, it's a living hell.